Okay, I'm being patient. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to talk about tonight. As you can see, we're talking about murder. No, you cannot learn how to do mean things to your siblings. That is not the purpose of this class. No, you can't leave, Lydia. Oh, I need... Yeah, sometimes it desyncs. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start off this today with our evening prayer. This is actually a prayer that Martin Luther would use every single day. He had a prayer that he would say every morning when he woke up, and then he would say in the evening before he went to bed, he would have a prayer. How many of you prayed before you go to bed? Okay. Oh, we'll have to practice that when we talk about prayer. Yes, that's all it is. I mean, but getting into a habit of praying is great. So we're going to take part of what Martin Luther would do, and he would use this prayer. So we're going to pray it since it's the end of the day-ish. We're going to go ahead and use this prayer and pray it together out loud. All right? The Lord be with you. I thank you, my heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously kept me this day, and I pray that you would forgive me all my sins where I have done wrong, and graciously keep me this night. For into your hands I commend myself, my body and soul, and all things. Let your holy angel be with me, that the evil foe may have no power over me. Amen. All right. What do we know so far? We've been talking about the Ten Commandments for a number of weeks. What have you learned, Mariana? What? Go ahead. Which commandment is that? The third commandment is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Brendan. That's right. The first word, that is not a commandment. It's a statement, right? It's a statement of who God is and who we are as God's children. All right. Roland, what do you got for me? Which commandment is that? The fourth commandment, honor your mother and father so that you will live long in the land I am providing you, right? We don't want to live short lives. We want to live long lives, right? So you got to listen to your mom and dad. Brody Peruka, what's up? That's you shall have no other gods before me. You have the essence of it, yes, that there is only one true God. All the other stuff out there is fake, and so that we should just believe there is just one true God. You shall have no other gods before me. All right. What else? Anything else you guys have learned in confirmation this year about the Ten Commandments? Mr. Henry. Moses received them. Where did he receive them? Which mountain? Anybody? Roland. Mount Sinai. Very good. Very good. I heard you say it too, Brody. Very nice. Very nice. Anything else that we remember, Mariana? I'm sorry. Your math totally muffles your voice. Do not use the Lord your God's name in vain, right? The second commandment. All right. Brody. That is one of the commandments. That is actually the commandment we're going to talk about next week. That is the sixth commandment, which is very easy to remember because in German, this is how I remember it. What's German? 6 in German? That would be no. Sex. And the sixth commandment is you shall not commit adultery. See, that's how my brain works. Got to link things together so you don't forget them. Anyhow, yes, ma'am. We did talk a little bit about the 95 Theses and how Martin Luther, we were talking about Reformation Day, and how that whole started this whole process of us being Lutherans, 500 years later, because some guy got a question, and he didn't like what he saw, and he took action, and he posted them up on the wall so that he could be like, hey, this is not right, let's talk about this. Yes, ma'am. It created a division, yes, basically between the Catholics and the Protestants. There was a lot of fighting between people because Martin Luther not only made people think about religion, but he also made people think about what it was like to have these lords that were over the land, and the people who were under them were like, we don't need to bow down to these lords. So it caused a lot of civil strife. That Martin Luther, he's a rebel rouser. So we're going to get talking, though. That was very good. Thank you all for recapping what we've talked about so far. But if you could get out your notebooks and stuff and your Bible, because we are going to go into a lot of good stories this week, because we're talking about the fifth commandment, which is, you shall not murder. That's it. It's that short. Some of these have been really long, and they go on and on about the Sabbath, or they go on about the honoring your parents. This one is short and sweet and to the point. You shall not murder. But it's going to take us the entire hour to talk about this because there's a lot to cover in this commandment. So, what is a definition of murder? This is what the dictionary says murder is. Murder is the unlawful, premeditated killing of one human being by another. What? It's technically called second-degree murder or reckless homicide, which homicide just means to kill a person. So there are different degrees of laws, yes. But when we're talking about in the Bible, we're talking about them. Murder is about killing a person. Yes, ma'am. That's murders. Do you know what, 3 crows is called? A murder of crows. You guys are a bunch of kids. 3 crows is called a murder. Anyhow. Yes, Brendan. Yes. Well, this is what it's called. If it's lawful killing, that's probably not called murder. Because it's okay, it's approved. If a king kills somebody they don't like, it's not murder. It's called an execution. So that's a different word for killing. We're going to talk about killing. Because this, does it just talk about, is all God's talking about is just simply killing another person? We're going to talk about that. Brandon. That's a good question. We're going to talk about that. Yes, Lydia. Oh, you guys are just going off the deep end. It could be called an assassination, which is a different type of killing. And we'll talk about, is that still right? Or is it wrong? You guys already have a ton of questions. See, this is why I knew we were going to have a lot to talk about. But we do have a lot to go over. We have a lot of videos I want you to get to. So, please help me stay focused and get going through this. So to clarify, this is not about killing animals. That's a whole, because I've taught this enough times, people start asking, well, what about killing animals? Is that... We're not talking about animals, okay? We're talking about people. 2, this is not about accidents. Accidents happen, people die. Sometimes people accidentally die because of things that we do. This is not talking about that, right? Okay, so let's not get into that whole gray area of questions about accidents and stuff. This is about intentionally harming another person or causing them to be harmed by inaction. You don't do something that allows somebody else to die, okay? So, this is what Martin Luther writes in his small catechism in the back of your blue book. He writes, we are to fear and love God, because that's what we should always do before everything, right? We should fear and love God, so that we neither endanger nor harm the lives of our neighbors, but instead help and support them in all life's needs. This is where we start getting into these commandments from here on out. Martin Luther is going to say it's not about just not doing something, like not killing, not lying, not stealing. We, as believers, as followers of Christ, have an obligation to do the opposite. Not to harm people, but to help people. Not to lie and tear people down, but to say things that lift them up and make them feel good. Not to steal from people, but also to protect what they have. These are the things Martin Luther says. It's not just this one little thing. You have to do go to the opposite end and try to do things to better people's lives. That is our obligation as Christians. Does that make sense? So who is my neighbor? I want everybody to go to Luke chapter 10, verse 25 to 37. And you're going to want to at least highlight or underline the title of this section. And whoever gets there first, I want you to raise your hand and tell me what it is called. Luke chapter 10. So which testament of the Bible is that in? That's the chapter, but what testament? New Testament. So the second half of the Bible, there are 4 Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So the third book of the New Testament, Mariana, what page is it on first? So everybody else can catch up to us. 1000. 1069? Okay. And what's the name of the title of this section? The Good Samaritan, right? The parable of the Good Samaritan, 25 to 37? Okay. Who here has heard of the parable of the Good Samaritan before? Okay. It's a fairly common story. Yes. It is actually a word, it's actually a phrase that we use in modern English as somebody who does something good. So this is the story of the Good Samaritan. So in Luke chapter 10, I hadn't gone to this one because we have this story where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were always trying to trick Jesus. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus, because they wanted to test Jesus. They wanted to prove that Jesus was wrong. And he said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says to him, "What is written in the law? What do you read there?" He's asking him, "Well, you know the answer. You're a smart person. What does it say?" And the lawyer answers, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus said to him, "You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But the Lord... Yes, Jesus was good about that. People would ask him a question. He would ask them like, well, what about this? And get them to answer their own questions. So Jesus says, the guy goes, he didn't like the answer. He's like, okay, well, who is my neighbor? Because there were laws about who you could talk to. Who was a good person that you could associate with? And so he tells this story of the Good Samaritan, where this guy is going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and it's a bad, bad walk. You literally go through this place. Have you ever heard, when you prayed the Lord's Prayer, right? Walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Have you heard that phrase? That was actually what was called, the area between Jerusalem and Jericho was called the valley of death. There is an actual place in America called Death Valley, yes. But it was because there were these deep, dark canyons that people could hide in, and as you traveled through there, thieves were known to like jump out and assault people on the way between Jerusalem and Jericho. So this guy is traveling there, and he gets waylaid, and the people beat him up, and they throw him on the ground and leave him to die. Next thing you know, a priest walks by, a guy who worked in the temple. He walks by, and he looks, and he goes, sees this guy on the side of the road, walks to the other side of the road, and goes around. And a little bit later, a Levite, somebody who also worked in the temple, who would have been a holy person, walks up and he sees this guy laying on the ground, and he walks by and leaves him to die. And then in walks this Samaritan. And a Samaritan for a Jew was somebody you didn't talk to. Okay? They were considered unclean people. They were considered people who didn't believe the right things about God, and so you wouldn't talk to them. You wouldn't help them. And the Samaritan walks up and sees this Jewish person laying on the ground, bleeding and dying, which two of his people had already passed him by, and the Samaritan picks him up and takes him to an inn and pays for the innkeeper to help tend his wounds and gives him money and says, "I'm going to be back in a week. If it costs more, keep track of the bill and I will pay it." Who was the neighbor? The Samaritan. The Samaritan was the neighbor. Not the people you expected to, right? The priest, the guy who works in the temple, the Levite who knew the laws and was like very well revered within the society of the Jewish people. They both walked by. Do you know why? Some people say it, yes. Yes, you had to be clean to go inside a temple. And if you touch somebody else's blood, are you considered clean anymore? No. So that's why they left him on the side of the road. So who is our neighbor? As we think about this, who is your neighbor? Who is your neighbor, Roland? Anyone? That is the exact actual answer. The people in this church are your neighbors. The people in your schools are your neighbors. The people on your teams are your neighbors. The people who physically live next door to you on your street, they're your neighbors. The people, technically, who live in Africa are our neighbors. Everybody is our neighbor. Jesus didn't differentiate between people that we should love and people we shouldn't love. Yes, Roland. What does this have to do with murder? Oh, hold on. We are to fear and love God so that we neither endanger nor harm the lives of our neighbors. So the whole purpose of it was so you to start thinking, who is my neighbor? Everybody's your neighbor. So should we harm or kill anybody? No. Yes, Brendan. If he had died, you could argue that. All right, Genesis chapter 4. This should be really, really fast. I want you to go to Genesis chapter 4. Which book of the Bible is Genesis? The first one in the Old Testament. The very, very first. It's like the third or fourth page of your Bible. You're going to see Genesis chapter 4. Murdering. We have the story of Cain and Abel. This is the first story of murder in the Bible. The first story of a person killing another person. Adam and Eve had two sons, Cain and Abel. Right? And in the story, so I want you to, right next to this story, I want you to write murder in your Bible. Go ahead and write right next to this story in Genesis chapter 4, murder. You can write it in big, bold letters. You could write it, no, but I get where you're going. Cain murders Abel, is what it says. In the course of time, so Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of ground. It means he was a farmer. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord the offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel, for his part, brought of the firstlings of his flock, their fat portions. So they both brought an offering. Cain brings some grain, some fruit, some things that he's grown, and gives it to God. It says that Abel, his brother, brings some of the firstlings, the best sheep that he has, and brings it to God. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offerings, but for Cain and his offerings he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. His face fell. He was angry. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it." So Cain says to his brother Abel, "Let's go out into the field." And so they go out into the field, and Cain kills his brother because he's jealous of what God liked his offering better because Abel gave him the best of what he had. And so he's jealous of his brother, and so he kills him and leaves him lying in the field. And it says God comes to Cain and says, "Where is your brother?" And Cain goes to God, "What? Do I look like my brother's keeper? Am I responsible for my brother?" Now, did God know where his brother was? He knew, but he was trying to prove a point. God doesn't ask us questions for no reason. He asked him specifically, "Are you your brother's keeper?" And the answer to that for him and for us is yes. We are responsible for the people around us. We're here to look after each other. You're not here to go it alone. As much as some of you might be like, "I can do everything by myself, I don't need other people," you do. And if you don't need them at that moment, somebody needs you. So we have this initial story. The first brothers in history, hate grows so much that one of them kills the other person. Some people would argue that it's part of just being human. We're just bad. I don't know. What do you think? Are we bad? Are we evil? Not at first. Do we learn it? Sometimes. I don't know the answer to that either. Some people say we learn it. Some people say we're inherently evil, and the only thing that makes us not evil is God. I don't know what that answer is. Brandon. Typically, you're right. We don't go to this extreme in our relations with each other, our brothers and sisters. We don't get that much. We'll come back and talk about that. So this is the first story of murder in the Bible. There are lots of stories in the Bible. I hate to tell you this. There's lots of stories in the Bible where people get killed. Lots and lots. But I want to talk about it. Oh, my slides got out of line. Anyhow, we'll go back to this. So is murder wrong? Is what Cain did to Abel wrong? Who said, if you think it's wrong, raise your hand. Okay? If you think it was okay for Cain to murder his brother, raise your hand. Okay? Why? Okay? We do. Sometimes we have those times where our brothers and sisters get so annoying. We can understand it, right? But I think we would all agree killing another person is wrong, right? If for no other reason than one, God commands it. Two, the law of our land commits it as saying this is wrong. Okay? So we can kind of agree. Flat out just walking up and killing somebody because you're jealous or something is wrong. Okay? Lydia. Okay? I'm talking about in general, like for all people. I get what you're saying there about that specific case, but in general, it's wrong. Chris. Yes, he got kind of banished off into the world. He literally got marked. God marked him so that as he went around the place, everybody would know what he would do, but they would know not to punish him. So he had to live knowing what he had done was his punishment. Yes. Oh, you're getting into the moral dilemma of like, is there a point where saving lives is greater than killing lives? That is a good question. We're going to talk about that in about 2 slides. So keep that in mind. Is there a time where killing is okay? Right? We can say killing somebody because you're jealous, that's not cool, right? Just because you're envious of somebody else and what they have or what they've done, killing them, we can all agree is wrong. That's pretty straightforward. Brendan. That gets into a whole bigger discussion about the story of Adam and Eve, which we're not going to go into today, but we will keep that in mind. We'll have a question and answer session later on. I am going to write that question down and pull in Lewis and Pastor Steve to answer the question of like, who did Adam and Eve's children marry? Right? They just had Cain. Who did they marry? Because you got to have marriage to have more kids. So there must have been other people. We'll talk about that. That's a strange one to contemplate. Okay, so we're going to skip ahead a few chapters to 1 Samuel 17. Mr. Peruka Sr., because I know you know this, where is 1 Samuel? Huh? Old Testament, right? Do you know what's in the story of the stories around there? These are called the histories. Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. These are the books that are the history books of what was going on in the people's lives of Israel. So 1 Samuel chapter 17. Yes, Brody. You have a random question? You have a random guess at what happens? David and Goliath battle. Yes. So this is what happens in this story. David is a shepherd, right? His brothers have gone off, and his dad's like, hey, I need you to take this stuff to your dad because we're in war. The Israelites were in a battle with the people that were called the Philistines. And there was this big old fight going on between these two people. And David's dad said, here, take this stuff to your dad and take this cheese to the commanders of the army, to provide for them. And so he goes up there, and he gets there, and on one side of this valley are the Israelites. And on the other side of this field are the Philistines. And the Philistines have this guy in their army called Goliath. And he's literally like 10 feet tall, a giant man, it says. And these two armies are sitting across from each other. Nobody really wants to fight because a lot of people will die. So Goliath comes out, and he knows he is just this monstrous, strong person. And he's like, I challenge you to send one person out and fight me, and whoever wins the war. If I win, the Philistines win. If your champion wins, the Israelites win. And the Israelites were scared because this guy is huge. Brandon, if you had to go out in battle and you were like you are right now, would you go out and fight a guy who's 10 feet tall and strong and wearing armor and all that? We wouldn't, right? We'd be terrified. And so everybody in the Israelite army was like, no, I don't want to go out there. And so David, who's this young shepherd boy, is like, why isn't anybody going out there and fighting this guy? And Saul's like, really? And Saul's the king. And he's like, David's like, I'll do it. And they're like, no, you're a young kid. He's like, look, I'm a shepherd. My flock's out there, and a lion comes up. I have to fend off the lion, or a wolf, or a bear. I've done it. All this guy is a bear trying to eat the flock. And so they're like, okay. Well, here, we need to put armor on. So they take this armor, and they put this big, gigantic, heavy metal helmet on him and this breastplate, and they've got him all in this big army, and this little guy, David, is like, it doesn't fit me. He can barely move because all this armor is holding him down. And so he takes off all the armor, and it says he goes down to the riverbed, and he grabs 5 stones. Because when he would fend off the wolves, and he would fend off the lions and the bears, he would use his sling, which is literally, if you've never seen, it's a leather strap. And you put the stone in there, and you swing it around, and you let it go, and it would fling this stone. And so they go out, and they face the battle, and David's on one side, and Goliath's on the other, and they walk up. And you can tell what Goliath is thinking. He's like, ha, 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 this is going to be so easy. I am going to totally destroy this little man. And David says a prayer to his God and swings his stone, and it hits Goliath right between the eyes and knocks him unconscious, dead on the ground. So David runs up and grabs Goliath's sword out off of his hands and cuts off Goliath's head, and the Israelites win. It's a great story, right? This young guy's the hero. But he literally has to go murder somebody, right? He kills them. But this is to answer your question, right? He saved hundreds of people from dying in this war. Is it murder? It's a good murder. Even if we're told by God that all people are our neighbors and we shouldn't kill them? I don't know. That's the question I'm asking. Brendan. Yes, some people would argue that. Some people would argue that tens of thousands of people, Americans died, but if America hadn't gotten into the war, that millions of people would have died in like World War II. That's a good argument, right? Is 20,000 lives worth millions of lives, right? Is one life worth 15 lives? I don't know. That's the question. Chris would say so. It's a good ratio, right? So what's not a good ratio? Is 1 for 2? Is that not a good ratio? How about 1 for 1? Well, I mean, if instead of like, okay, all right, Chris, here's the philosophical question. Is it okay, would you think it would be okay for you to kill somebody who wanted to kill your mom? Yes, that's what you're saying. To save your mom, it's okay for you to kill the person that wanted to kill her. Okay. There is no formula. There is no point in the Bible where it says this is okay and this is not okay. These are the questions. This is the dilemma of where killing goes. Is there a point where it's okay? Is there a point where it's not okay? Is it okay for David to kill Goliath? Some people would argue yes, because it created greater good. I would argue that no. It's still murder. Hold on. We're going to get to it. Is killing to protect others wrong? Most of you would say no. Is it still killing? Is killing wrong? Okay. We have a dilemma here, right? Parts of us say it's okay. Part of us have to admit that part of it is still wrong. Here we go. Bigger story. Joshua chapter 8. So we have one person killing one person, that's bad. One person killing another person to save a lot of people, that's okay. Here is Joshua. Joshua is the book right after Deuteronomy. It is the story of the people of Israel going into the promised land. So they have this battle. And this happens repeatedly in the book of Joshua. They literally go in, and Joshua takes his army of thousands of people that he picks, and he sets up, and they have a battle, and they kill everybody. They kill all of the enemy. But they also kill the women. Yeah. Is it okay? Because remember, God had told the Israelites, I am sending you to the promised land. I am going to give you all of this land. Now, there are people there who don't want you to be there. And I'm going to tell you how to defeat them. And so they go and they kill them. And repeatedly throughout the story, the people of Israel will literally wipe cities off the face of the earth. In some cases, killing all of the people, all of the children, all of the women, all of the livestock. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. is it okay? Lydia is saying no. Why is it? What about it offends you? Okay. Okay. Because it was God's plan, right? It was God's plan for them to take over this land. So you're saying it's okay? Kind of. What part of it makes your stomach turn a little bit? Technically, he hasn't given the commandment at this point. Oh, well, no, yeah, he has given the commandment at this time. Yes. He has given, you're right. So there is that commandment, right? You shall not kill. You shall not murder. Some people were like, well, it's not murder. It's war. It's killing, right? Roland? Okay. He's contradicting what he already said. Brandon? So women and children are off limits. Civilians, okay. So as long as you're killing people who are active parts of this fight, it's okay. Because it's war. And war has to happen. Okay. 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 Brendan? Not necessarily. Okay, that's a good question. Brody, what is your question? This is what it says. Then the Lord said to Joshua, stretch out your sword that is in your hand towards Ai, the town, for I will give it into your hand. And then Joshua stretched out the sword that was in his hand toward the city. As soon as he stretched it out, the troops in ambush rose quickly out of the place and rushed forward. They entered the city, took it, and at once set the city on fire. So when the men of Ai looked back, the smoke of the city was rising in the sky. They had no power to flee. Blah, blah, blah. They ambushed them. I don't know. This is honestly one of those parts of the Bible that I struggle with. How can a God who says we don't kill do this? But God had also promised that he would give this land to his people. He promised initially to give them the land before he gave them the commandments. Because remember, he gave them this land way back in the time of Abraham. That's why we talked about this story, right? He went and gave it to Abraham, and Abraham was there, and then they left, and then they came back, and he's like, I'm going to take you back there, but there's all these people. It is theirs. God said it was. It's tough, okay? I don't expect us to come to an answer, but let me go on the next part. I'm going to take quick. What are you saying, Brody? Yep. Not at that time. You get to ask, that's a good question. Because at that time, who were his people? Israel. The rest of the world had their own gods that they worshiped, and they were seen as foreigners. They were not seen as people. God had specifically chosen the people of Israel, and they were his people, not the rest of the world. I know, this is where your brain's going, but Jesus is way, way later. And even when Jesus first came, he came to save the Israelites. And eventually it broadened to save everybody. And it hurts our brain. I get it, Brody. That look on your face is what I feel sometimes. It's like, how can God do this? But you have to look at it from their perspective. God is carrying out the thing that he promised. He's fulfilling his end of the covenant with the people of Israel. He's blessing them to give them what he has promised. Does that get ugly? Yes. Brandon. Oh. Yes. 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 All the plagues, the angel of death, these are all things that God sent that ended up probably killing lots and lots and lots and lots of people. This is where it gets, it's hard. It's hard for us. People have been discussing this and debating this. Really, 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 really smart people have been debating this for centuries and millennia, thousands of years. I don't have the exact answer, but we're going to get to the point where I give you something that gives me comfort. Okay? Is war wrong? Who here says war is wrong all the time? Who says war is okay? I will vote for that. Here's the thing. We are not built for violence. In the beginning of the Bible, in Genesis, it tells us that we were created in God's image. We are not created to be people of violence. This is why when we do violence, it bothers us. Now you will say there's some people that does it. Yes, those people have mental issues. And I'm saying that jokingly, but I'm also saying that seriously. There are, yes, of course, people out there who do not understand and do things maliciously that will hurt animals, will hurt people without feeling it. That is not normal. And we can all agree those people have issues that need to be addressed, okay? That is unfortunate. But in general, it makes us sick as people when other people get hurt. When we see violence, when we see hundreds of people getting killed, when there's a shooting at a school and children get killed, our first gut response is that is a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. Can we all agree on that? Because that's how God made us. God made us to love life. There is no time that he doesn't do that. But, here's the unfortunate part. I would argue that at times the violence is still, I would argue that killing is always wrong. Okay? Killing is always wrong. But there are times where certain people in our society take upon themselves the necessary need to do that violence to protect other people, right? Police officers, when they take that badge and that uniform, they're saying, I am going to put myself in front of violence to save other people. My dad was a soldier. My father-in-law was a soldier. When they took that oath, they knew, I may have to go to war. I may have to do that. I am going to protect the people I love. And if I can make a sacrifice to do that, that is necessary. It's not good. It's necessary. What happens when a police officer shoots somebody? What's the first thing they do to a police officer after they shoot somebody? Yes. Yes. They get taken off the line. They no longer work. They go and see and talk about what happened. And typically, They have to go and talk to somebody, a therapist, to clear them, to get them ready to go back. Why? Because it's traumatic. It's hard for us to cope with the fact that we killed another person. And the police realize this, so they pull them off the line so that they can deal and sort out these things. When we hear these things, have you heard of post-traumatic stress? We have soldiers who have gone to Afghanistan and Iraq and these different wars, and they come back and they still have these issues. My grandfather was in World War II. My grandfather was also in Korea. Until the day he died, he still had times where he would have experiences that would bring back the things that he experienced in that time. Because it was so terrible. So seeing killing is a horrible, horrible thing. I will never say that killing is right. Even for some people to say, well, this person's killed somebody else, we should take their life. No. I would argue that no. Because God says nobody's unsavable. And when we do that, we're saying they are. Is it necessary sometimes for people to kill other people, to commit violence? Yes. But we should do everything in our abilities to refrain from that. And this is where God is going with, you shall not murder. We should do everything in our power not to kill people. Yes. Roland. That would be really cool, I think, if we could do that. Like mark people and let them set. I do. And I'm not going to get into a big debate because there are very deep sides of capital punishment, which is what is called when we kill a criminal. There's very deep sides about how long we should incarcerate, what we should incarcerate people for, put them in jail. I'm going to say, yes, people need to be punished for what they do. But is killing something that hurts us in the process? Everybody I know who's killed somebody, a soldier, that's come back and they have these stories, they're like, part of you has to deal with that. It's not easy. All right. I know we have more questions, but I'm going to move forward on a couple things. If you still have them, we'll come back to those questions, okay? So I want to watch this video clip. It's going to be very hard to see because it's a very, very old clip, and it is mostly just listen to the words. The movie is called The Interpreter, and there's been something happened, and this guy is investigating it, and he's talking to this woman who is an interpreter, and she grew up, though she's a white woman, she grew up in Africa. And she's talking about, part of this, she'll talk about an experience of how people deal with killing where she's from. If the internet's working. Try it again. Is everything good with the live stream? Okay. Okay. Well, apparently we don't get to see the video. We'll try it again. I wrote on the top there, vengeance is a lazy form of grief. So here's the story she tells. The people in Africa, when somebody kills another person, what they do is they would take a year of grief and they would hold that person basically in prison for a year. And at the end of that year, they would throw a gigantic party. And they would go throughout the night celebrating the life of the person that was gone. And in the morning, they would take the person who had killed the person, the criminal, and they would bind their hands and feet, and they would put them in a boat, and they would take them out into the middle of the water, and they would throw the person in the water. And the family was there in the boat, and they had a choice. They could either let the person die, and they would have their justice, but they would have to deal with the fact that they took another life. Or they could save that person and pull them out of there and have peace. She goes on and says, vengeance is a lazy form of grief. Killing another person to get back at them is being lazy. It's the easy way. It's the quick way of dealing with grief. The same thing happens when you have a fight with somebody. Somebody hurts you, and if you strike back, and I've heard it so many times, well, if you don't stand up for yourself, people are going to laugh at you, they're going to take advantage of you, they're going to do that. Striking back is the easy way. And it never solves anything. I have never seen it where somebody hits somebody and they're like, oh, you're right, let's be friends again. Right? That doesn't happen. Somebody hurts somebody else, somebody hurts them back. The person who gets hurt again, do they go, yep, okay, we're even? No. They're like, I'm going to get back to them. I don't know when. I don't know how. It feeds upon each other. And that's what she's trying to say in this. Violence that creates more violence just creates more violence. That's why God gives us His commandment. Don't be violent to each other. I wish so. Did I do that? Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah, one more slide. Mercy, not murder. Right? Jesus taught us mercy throughout His existence on the world. He taught us mercy, not murder. No time did Jesus say, hey, if this person, really is mean to you, it's okay to murder you. When Jesus is about to the people come the night before He dies, and He knows He's going to die on the cross. They come up to Him, and the guards are there, and they've got swords, and one of His disciples grabs a sword off a guy and chops off a guy's ear. Right? Protecting Jesus. Knowing that he doesn't want Jesus to be taken to jail. Jesus says, don't do that. We don't do violence. Even though He knows He's going to die the next day in the most violent way He could, that was imaginable at that time. He's like, don't do violence. We have to learn from that. We have to live into Jesus' example of mercy. Is it easy? No. I've been in exactly 2 fights in my entire life. One of them I still remember to the day, and it happened when I was your age at Boy Scout camp. A guy hit me with a stick. I grabbed the nearest stick, and I just tried to wail into him. I still look back at that, and it makes my stomach turn knowing that I did that. That I lost so much control that I literally hit somebody as hard as I could I just wanted to hurt them. I just wanted to kill them. I was in a rage. And I was at Boy Scout camp in the middle of the woods, and all the kids were like, yeah! Right? You've seen it. How many times at school where you see that? Somebody throws a punch, and there's a fight. What does everybody do? Circle up, yelling and screaming. Is that what God intends for us? No. All right, we're going to try another film. This is from The Karate Kid. How many of you have actually seen the movie The Karate Kid? Okay. So the young kid, is getting beat up. He's having trouble with these guys who are martial arts students, and his friend, Mr. Miyagi, goes to try to end this. Oh. The bottom right, you could try it. We seem to be having bad internet tonight. Okay, which is going to be really bad because I had another good clip I wanted to watch. Okay, go ahead and try that. Go ahead at the bottom where it says YouTube. It's literally the internet is out to get us. Oh, skip ad. Okay. They may be having issues with their strength. I mean, this happens. So, if you have not seen the movie, or if you have, I'm going to go ahead and explain it. So he has this, and he's going in there, go to see this class where they're teaching this karate, and the teacher repeatedly tells his students, when you're in a fight, there is no mercy, right? They're sparring, and one kid knocks the other one to the ground, and he's like, finish him. Hit him again while he's on the ground, right? It says no mercy. Eventually, they come to agreement. They're not going to fight until this tournament. And at the end of the tournament where he's won, they're out in the parking lot. It actually is the beginning of the next movie, right? And they're standing there, and the teacher is yelling at his students, "Hey, you suck! You're horrible! You lost! You lost to this kid! You're terrible!" And just yelling at them, and Mr. Miyagi goes up and he says, "Stop." And the guy's like angry, and so he throws a punch, and Mr. Miyagi runs out of the way, dodges out of the way. Guy punches a window, hand bleeding. Turns around, and he does it, throws another punch, hits another window of a car, hands just bleeding. Mr. Miyagi takes him down, knocks him to the ground. He's like on his knees, and he's holding them there, and he could literally kill him. Right? And he repeats back the words that this teacher told his students, no mercy. And he swings and he stops right before, and he pinches his little nose and goes, honk. Because he's going to that point, he's expressing that point that violence is not the answer, right? Mercy is the answer. This is what Jesus tells us. Mercy is the important thing, not violence. Go ahead and flip to the next slide. Go ahead and see if it'll play. It was all working just great and dandy earlier. I think they're all hogging all the internet. That's why. Except that it's wired, so that doesn't work. What? I know, I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. All right, go ahead and we'll go. So mercy, not murder. But it's not just, the key to this is not that it's all about physical violence. When Martin Luther says in this, we should take care of all the needs of our people, our neighbors, right? He's talking about not just the physical needs, not just harming them, not just making sure they have enough food. We want to protect them socially. We want them to feel included, part of the group. We want to make sure that we don't harm them spiritually. Make them feel like God doesn't love you. How many times do we see that in the world, that certain people say, well, God doesn't want you or love you if you're a certain way? That's killing somebody spiritually or mentally, tormenting somebody, right? This commandment is not just about killing. It's about protecting people, showing them mercy, making sure that their spiritual, physical, social, and mental needs are taken care of. Wow. Yeah. Try it. See if it'll work. That is so weird that it's like, okay, go ahead, go back out. Huh? Well, I know. It's like partially working, but it's every video we try to stream isn't streaming, so it leads me to believe there's probably something wrong on YouTube's end. Yes, we're streaming to it, that we just can't. Try it one more time. Oh, okay. I may have to play this video next week for us. It's not, yeah, okay. It's YouTube is having issues, which is odd. But there's this video, and it's how do you deal with a bully, right? You guys hear this all the time about bullying in school. This guy has this unique approach. He's like, what if we don't let people get to us? What if we're so secure in who we are, or at least we say the things that prevent people? He does it so much better than I could explain. So we're going to watch it next week because I think it's important for us to remember and to know on this. But last thing I want to talk about. So you all have an assignment when you go to your small groups, which then becomes your homework assignment for the week. Okay? In your small groups, I want you to figure out how you can help and support somebody in your life this week. How you can be there to support somebody's needs, physical or spiritual or mental or social, this week. And I don't want it to be your best friend. Okay? I want you to think of somebody you know that needs help. Whether it's just to go and sit with them at school, at lunch, and talk to them, or to write somebody a note, or to call somebody, or to check in with somebody you haven't, that friend that you haven't talked to in a few months, or that person that you know is quarantined and they don't feel socially connected, reaching out to them and talking to them, like actually maybe call them on the phone and have a conversation with them, not just send them a text like, hey, how are you? So I want you to figure out one person in your life. It could even be an adult person. Maybe you know somebody who's older, who's a senior, who's been locked, kind of keeping their distance from everybody in their home, right? Maybe it's a grandparent or somebody like that who hasn't been getting out because they're of COVID or something like that. And call them or write them a letter and say, hey, I've been thinking about you. You want to talk for a few minutes? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about you shall not murder, but instead take care of all the needs of our neighbors. So you in your class are going to come up with something specific for Brandon to do, for Lydia to do, for Annalise to do, for Jackson to do. All of you, come up something for you to do yourself, and then do it this week. And I want you to write it down in your class, okay? I know, this is like, Chad, you're making us be awkward. You're going to make us do something that we have to actually communicate and love people in the world. Oh, no. I know, God is hard. God is rough. Okay? That is your homework, your in-work group assignment leading into your homework assignment. And I'm going to follow up with you next week and say, like, hey, what happened with this? Because I want to know. I want to know what you did and how it turned out. Because I will tell you, people crave interaction. Every week, our staff talks about the people. We talk about 12 families in our staff meeting, okay? We go alphabetical order, so we take 12 people every week. We go through their names, we talk about what we know, and then we spend time that week, we send them a letter saying, hey, this week, people on our staff are going to be praying for your family. And almost every week that we do this, somebody will call back to us or write us a letter or send us an email saying, you know what, I got your letter, and I needed somebody to be praying for me this week, and it made me feel connected and wonderful and good knowing that you were doing it. Almost every single week. It's like God is doing things. So if you think of that person in your life that could use it, I bet you God is putting that in your hands and really wants you to do it. Brendan. Could you just call her and say, hey, how's everything going? Well, you don't necessarily have to talk about the thing that may be upsetting them. I'm just saying just reaching out to people alone would be enough. But that's up to you. I'm not dictating what you have to do with this assignment. I'm just trying to give you suggestions. Okay? Anybody have any questions about this? Okay, because next week we're going to talk about sex. Okay? I know you're all excited. I can see those looks like, great. We're going to talk about sex. But I still invite everybody to be here. Why? Because we're going to talk about stuff in here, but then we're going to give you an opportunity to break up, and the guys are going to go one place and talk with me and Lewis, because Lewis is cooler than I am, and you all will talk to him. And then we have Kara and Alyssa and Maddie, and that group are going to kind of take the girls and give you an opportunity to talk about questions that might come out of what we're having there, so you don't have to ask embarrassing questions to Chad. Because I get it. I'll talk to you all day about pretty much anything, but I know it's an embarrassing subject. All right? The Lord be with you all this week. I love you all. Have a good week. I'm sorry for all you kids in Wentzville who now have to go virtual.
I have to go to it tomorrow because our school is so bad.
It is. All right. You're dismissed.